Headbangers. Morbid Angel versus Gatecreeper.
Hi, welcome back to Headbangers. It's me and Nathan here. We thought we'd try something new today. Would like to explain what we're doing, Nathan?
It's not really trying something new, is it, Brad? It's fucking locked down to electric fucking boogaloo, innit? I know.
So
Well, at the minute we're doing, we're gonna keep the fucking podcast going. We're gonna keep it going. We just can't do it in the same place. Even it's fucking stupid. At this point,
I don't think it feels so weird to like not be one at
I
the
know,
same.
no.
And
I miss you.
Like doing it together. I miss you too, Nathan.
I know, I miss you. But yeah, since obviously lockdown is commencing in the UK and stuff like that, so we didn't really want to get into trouble for breaking lockdown rules, did we?
Exactly. Yeah, I don't fancy a nice big fine assigned to me. So thought this is the only way to get the podcast going, and we won't reveal too much yet. But we might have a special guest for next week that we're pretty stoked about. But we don't let it announce yet because we need to find out if it's confirmed first.
Well, there's two that were in the talks.
Two in the talks.
Two.
Yeah.
One might be confirmed by the end of today, and the other one still hasn't got back to me yet. But yeah, two special guests, and then we've got a bit of a new segment, haven't we, Brad? We've got a bit of a new segment.
We do have a new segment. So what we basically want to do, we want to call it like Headbangers Clash, because we're going to pick an album by a classic band that's kind of in the works in the genre. So maybe like death metal, the first pioneers of that genre, and then kind of seeing the bands now that are carrying on the flag of the genre, and then seeing what they're doing with it, like how they've changed the sound, if there's any sort of correlation between the two, and like different elements that maybe weren't with the original bands but are now available.
As well to see, like, has the genre really changed?
Yeah.
What
are
bands doing now that's interesting? Just stuff like that. I thought it'd be an interesting thing. So what we're kicking off with today, Brad? What we're doing?
So I thought we'd start with two albums by two amazing bands. We're gonna have Morbid Angel and Gatecreeper. Yep. So Morbid Angel, they don't really need any introduction, really, do they?
Nah,
so one of the pioneers of death metal. It influenced so many bands to come, especially in the tech death scene as well, because it was also early remnants of what was to come in terms of like being technical but also really brutal at the same time. And then you've got Gatecreeper, who are just carrying on the flag but doing it in such an amazing way, like using, I like to think, the best elements of the first pioneers and then making it their own.
Yeah, as well, like, I felt like doing this segment is really good for us. As with Morbid Angel, like, I found it quite hard to write this review, I'm not gonna lie. Not because it was like, it wasn't like easy to write it as, oh, this is a good review. This is a good album. It was hard to write it from the certain stance of what hasn't been said about this album. Do you know what I mean? Like,
point, yeah.
Like I was looking at it as a, everyone knows fucking Altars of Madness. Like, everyone knows. So I thought I'd open up with a bit of production information of like who it was mixed by when it was also released as well. So it was released in 1989 and it was mixed by Tom Morris. Yeah. Bit of background about Tom Morris. I think he worked in this just recording studio in Florida, and majority of the Floridian death metal bands went to Tom Morris because he was one of the only people that knew how to actually mix that type of music.
He was like the guy that you call, you know what I mean?
Well, you got to think now anyone can kind of mix that type of music. Like, there's fucking a YouTube video but in 1989. No one really writing shit like this.
Yeah, there wasn't as much software as there was back then.
So new. Death metal was so new, and then as well, like, people knew what to do with thrash, but this was just something a bit more creme de la creme, a little bit tastier. So a lot of them did struggle with how we're gonna make drums this heavy sound good. And this fast sound good, and he was one of the guys that fucking makes it possible for us all to be able to mix it now and what we know. So yeah, it was made by big old Tom Morris. Well, mixed by.
Yeah.
I want to just kind of kick off. I've made some notes on the songs, and I kind of just want to kick off with the actual ones that stood out the most to me.
Yeah.
Rather than dissecting every single song individually. So I think Immortal Rights, that's a fucking amazing way to start off the
Oh yeah,
actual
just
album.
that fucking riff at the start that is proper just leads you into like what's to come, and you're
Yeah,
just like, oh my god, we're in for a treat right now. You know what I mean?
yeah, as well, like that opening. You know, I actually thought as well when I heard the opening, which kind of sounds like there's
Yeah,
something going backwards. Do you know what I mean? Like creepy
yeah, it
sort of
does. Yeah,
opening. Um,
reminds me of
I
Hell
know.
Awaits a bit with
Well,
Slayer with like the lyrics like that are backwards. It's
yeah.
kind of
Well,
interesting.
have you noticed that all bands, like death metal bands from Florida, have probably used that same opening at some point?
Yeah, it's
Why have
almost
you
like,
noticed that?
could you imagine like for these really early bands, like just like the late end of the 80s, you've gone through your thrash metal sort of scene, and then these fucking kick off. These first bands, like with Immortal Rights, that first starts off the album, like, oh my god, people do this? You
Yeah,
must be like, wow, like this is such a step ahead of what was already being doing at the time.
yeah. Like as well, you got to think of like you got used to dive bombs and shit like that, and then
Yeah.
you didn't get, and like your standard sort of put a variation on like a punk drums. You got your fast fucking guitar, but then these guys are like, oh yeah, you know what we're gonna do though? We're gonna do fast drums. We're gonna do fast guitars, but then we're
Yeah.
also gonna down tune it, and then we're also gonna do this. Also gonna do that. Like imagine when you first heard that. Like, and then imagine you was a kid in the 80s.
That's
You
what I
fucking
mean.
bought a record just because you thought it looked cool. You popped it on. You're like, what the fuck is this?
Well, I'm sort of envious of people in that time zone because, when we got into metal, like everything was already in place. You know what I mean? People doing interesting things, but that was such a huge step. So I would have liked to be in that kid, like you said, that goes into the record store, thinks, that's a nice album cover, puts it on,
Yeah,
like, what the fuck?
yeah.
What's going
So,
on?
and that's what you get when you listen to this album. I feel like you kind of get the sense of this was definitely something fucking new when it came out. Like as well, like I just wanted to, Immortal Rights. It immediately kind of encapsulates everything that's going to be in
Yeah.
that album as a whole. Like it's got fast sections, but then I noticed like Morbid Angel do this with the music where they'll have a section where it does slow down, yeah, but then it'll immediately then kick back up faster than it was before it slowed down.
Yeah, it's like unpredictable, which I really like. And one thing that I want to talk about as well, you can definitely see the foundations, like I said, of tech death being in there because they
Yeah.
have this weird thing when they do like a really fast beat, but then they do like this transition when it switches in between, and then it
Mhm.
goes into something like completely new. Like it was a interesting idea about song structures that they managed to change it a bit. Because if you
Mhm.
look at thrash metal, it's chaotic, it's fast, but it usually follows a kind of a normal song structure.
Yeah.
Might be a chorus, might be a blast beat for a bit, but this is and it's like it's
Yeah.
really weird, but it's good.
Yeah. I'm glad you pulled that up because it was like how I imagine the approach to writing was something very, very different to um sort of the norm as well.
Yeah,
Like I feel like in this album there's there's like a level of rawness to the sound that is transcended through how old it is. Like you listen to it and you're like, oh yeah, this is just death metal. But you also got, I was listening to it in the mindset of like, what if I'd never listened to death metal before?
yeah,
And this would I was like, I've listened to the album many times before, and I was blown away listening to it again, but looking at it from that perspective where it were like,
it's
oh my,
interesting.
oh my God, like you can hear so many influences that would then so many sounds that were created then that then would influence future genres. Like there was some sections where I was also thinking, oh, this would be a black metal song.
Yeah,
So I mean, this section would be basically what black metal would develop the sound out of it. It's interesting reviewing a classic album because you can think of where this didn't exist before then, it exists now, and this is definitely where they got it from.
oh,
Like,
absolutely. Like you can hear Morbid Angel in so many bands when you really strip it down. But like you can see there that even they have some sort of thrash style to them, because it's like after that wave of bands in the 80s, you can see in the vocal delivery that thrash influence, but going a bit more guttural. So it's like they're taking that, and obviously as they progress their career, they develop more gutturals, more stuff. So they're playing around with stuff in this album, but it's all done so well. But then you can see it progress after that.
Yeah, as well. I feel like the album as a whole, like it's definitely one of those like build it like it's hard to think that this was like Morbid Angel's first album, yeah, and it was this good. Do you know what I mean? Like you know, even now when you look at a band's first album, you wouldn't really go, yeah, that's gonna be their Altars of Madness. But Morbid Angel, it is their Altars of Madness because they fucking made Altars of Madness. It's like fucking hell, like this is like their first album that was like released commercially and everything like that through an actual like company. And you kind of like, wow, they really knocked it out of the park. It's just mental. It's mental to think that, you know, they hit the ground running with that band.
Absolutely. What's interesting to think is, like, would that album be as successful today if it wasn't one of the pioneering death metal bands in that album? Because I think things are down to timing sometimes. Because those first bands, like, you know, they made amazing albums. I have no doubt that it would bomb today, like, amazingly. But if it didn't just come after that 80s style bands that were out at the time, would it have hit as hard?
I think it would have. I think it would have, because I feel like if you didn't get this, you wouldn't have got the wave of Florida death metal.
Well, exactly.
Because you know, Morbid Angel was a very big part of that, and you know, people can't say they want, like, you know, Floridian death metal like is straight up like Morbid. You know, there's again, like we go back to when a genre starts. There's normally a big four that then go with that, and you know, you got to think like you got to think there was like a lot of bands out there that were really changing people perceived heavy music for years. And I feel like if you hadn't had bands like Morbid Angel and the others turn up, I feel that probably would have happened, but later on, but it would not have been as big as it was.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like if it happened now, and say if it never happened, and it happened now, I think it would be just as big because we wouldn't have been exposed to that level of music.
And you've got to wonder, like, where the metal scene would be now if it wasn't for Morbid Angels, Altars of Madness, and also stuff like Obituary and Cannibal Corpse and all these pioneering bands. Where would it be? Because so many bands in their musicianship have taken snippets of what they did.
Yeah, as well, like, it's mental to think that we probably, off the top of my head, I could think of like 12 different fucking subgenres we wouldn't have if they hadn't turned up. Yeah, I mean, like, you got to think of all, and even, you know, I can think of 12 different main genres that probably wouldn't have turned up if they, you know, death metal weren't a thing.
Yeah.
Because that, I feel like death metal at that time was at the right moment, right time, and it pushed the, you know, the entire idea of heavy music forward. You got to think as well, like, you know, thrash was like the heaviest thing you could get, and people ended up getting sick of thrash.
Yeah.
And then, you know, obviously later on, people ended up getting sick of death metal, and that's how black metal started. It's all a chain reaction sort of thing. As well, like, I want to talk about the song "Suffocation" because Suffocation, I think, is my favorite track from this album. Because the vocals are very, very haunting. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's got this creepy vibe to it. As well as the guitar work. The guitar work is probably some of the best I've heard. Even by like modern band standards.
Yeah.
Like, and you got to think it was made so long ago, but the guitars and drums and every single thing about it, the production still holds up, as well as like the insane drums that are also then attached to it. But then you can also, I feel like it's a good example of where it started, what its initial inspiration was. You know, you can really, really hear the thrash elements in this track. And I feel like this song is a personal personification of sort of how death metal was back then, how it originally started. And it, you know, but then it also in the song kind of feels like how it is gonna then end up towards the end.
Yeah.
I feel like it almost tells a story of death metal.
No, it does. It's like it's got some chronological order to it in a weird way that I don't know if they did that on purpose, but obviously they're not going to know what's going to happen in many years to come. But it's quite interesting you should say that, and I think as well with like songs like Chapel of Ghouls, which is probably my favorite one, which I know it's probably the biggest one, but I just love it anyway. There's that mid section where they go into that sort of slow and like I said creepiness, adding new sounds in that. I feel like the thrash bands weren't doing like, and it's what's interesting about death metal to come as well because they start incorporating like different sounds, like not your standard musicianship, that kind of give the song like more dimensions. It doesn't feel as one dimensional anymore. Like it's not just metal guitars and metal drums. You've got like some keyboards and stuff, and it's interesting to see what people will then do with it in years to come.
Yeah. It's so I found it. This was I think this podcast was one that I was looking forward to. One of the ones I was looking forward to the most because I remember when we were talking about the ideas over the phone yesterday.
Yeah.
We were like, wait, no one's really doing this. No one's really fucking actually going through it. I actually really enjoyed listening to an old album and then directly after listening to a newer
Yeah.
album and being like, oh shit. Do you know what I mean? Like it's like, oh, these guys are getting this from that. These guys are getting this from that. These guys, and it's then culminating and it's advancing the genre
Yeah.
forward.
It's something interesting because it's we deconstruct songs in our spare time, as fun anyway. So it's good to actually put it, make some use out of it. So we like to do this anyway. We're both music nerds. We like to deconstruct songs. We like to analyze them and see where bands get influences. I think this is definitely a fun idea.
Yeah, as well. One thing I want to bring up about the Morbid Angel album is that
Yeah.
I find it incredibly impressive how well the drums are executed. Like the fills are very unique.
Yeah, they are.
Like they like you can't. It goes along and they play off the guitar very very well because you got the constant sense of where you don't know where it's gonna go because you can't predict where it's gonna go because you think it's gonna go into this section.
Yeah.
It completely doesn't. It goes into the opposite section that you thought. And it's impressive how consistent the drums are. As well, it's impressive how this album still holds up to this day.
Absolutely.
Do you know what I mean? Like normally you can go back to older bands, listen to a couple, a few albums back, or like one of their oldest albums, and being like, this is all right, this is good. I can see why I was impressed at the time, but I'm not impressed.
Yeah.
Whereas this is like, you listen to it and you're still impressed by the musicianship, if you get me.
It still
Like
holds
you're
up.
still like, oh, this was something different, and it still kind of feels like something different. I mean, it still feels like no one's touched that.
I agree.
And that's what I found really mesmerizing about this album. Is there any songs that you want to bring up that kind of stood out to you?
I like Maze of Torment.
Yeah.
Well,
I had Maze of Torment down as
yeah.
one of the things that I wanted to bring up as well.
I think with Maze of Torment, I like it because it's you can see the thrash influences because it's quite a fast song. That you've got songs like Immortal Rights, which is like a lot of slow sections, a lot of chugginess, but then you get to Maze of Torment, which is kind of just you can see the influence that they took from the bands before them, and it just rips hard. Like I feel like those first wave of Florida death metal bands just went, we don't give a fuck, we're gonna go as hard as we can.
Yeah.
And again, it must be shocking to just listen to that album, just like I've not had anything like this before. So it's really interesting. But the whole album is just, it's interesting to also see where Morbid Angel ended up as well, because they started like that, but then you've got like the last few albums where they sort of go for a bit of death and roll. At least with songs like 10 More Dead off one of the recent albums, like they have changed the sound quite a lot.
Yeah, and I feel like they will keep doing that because I feel like they're one of those bands that will keep adapting. Like, I really liked listening to this album. Like, I really really enjoyed it. I've like listened to it before, but like it was nice just actually being listening to a classic album again because a lot of stuff I have been listening to recently There's been newer stuff, and I love newer stuff. But it's just nice sometimes to go back to the old
I think
stuff.
it's always enjoyable when you just go back to the old albums, just get like a nice nostalgic feeling. It's like, oh, this is the good stuff, because you know what you're in for, and it's always going to be a treat. But you can still get excited every time you put it on.
Yeah. I think that as well, like what really impressed me is the production level of it.
Yeah.
Like, don't get me wrong. Obviously, we've got better, like more advanced equipment to get cleaner sounds. But like this album does not sound bad at all. Like I've heard bands come out now that have had worse produced stuff.
Oh yeah.
Do you know
But
what I
it
mean?
works in their favour. Like the recurring theme with Morbid Angel in this album is just like it's chaos, but it's controlled chaos. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They know what they're doing.
Yeah, you get that vibe that it's weird. It's like everyone knows what's going on. Well, Morbid Angel knows what's going on, but I imagine the audience at the time didn't.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, where they're like, "Where's this song gonna go?"
Yeah, literally.
Yeah, and overall, I think this album sort of set the bar for future death metal bands. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like this kind of came out, and then everyone that wanted to do death metal were like, okay, well, this is the minimum that we need to strive for.
We need to push the bar now.
And I feel.
Sorry, I don't understand.
Oh, I'm gonna unplug my Google Home.
No worries.
But no, I feel like this was like a sort of, it needs to be like almost Altars of Madness level if we're gonna do it right. And I feel like that's why you had so many good bands then come out at that time, because they all wanted to top each other. They all wanted to do their version of Altars of Madness, and then you had bands just constantly topping each other. 100% it holds up. You can definitely, as well, like you said, you can see where the starting point was as well, where it's like, oh, these guys were definitely pulling from Thrash at the time.
Yeah.
And they're trying to expand on it, and then it's become its own thing. So yeah, what would you rate this album?
10.
10.
Yeah,
I'd rate that 10.
Yeah.
I'd rate it 10 as well.
You can't complain for it, you know what I mean? You can't say they were copying anybody else. They were Morbid Angel. They were doing shit that nobody else was doing. Like you had the Florida death metal bands, but they all sound different. They've all got their own unique twist that bands would eventually try and make copycats of. But these bands, they had a unique sound. This album was incredible. The musicianship was on point. Like the production was amazing. Like, it works for their favor, and it's just a legendary album. You can't fault it.
Yeah, you can't. I can't pick a fault if I wanted. The only thing I could pick a fault on is sometimes it can feel repetitive. But I feel that's my own sort of judgment on it based on, because I've heard bands like that before now. Do you know what I mean? So it's got why I'm like, oh, yeah, it kind of sounds repetitive, but then I'm like, yeah, but probably when you judge it from at the time, it was something completely new. So people probably didn't feel like, oh, it's repetitive. Whereas, now we you go on Spotify, you can find 1,000 other death metal bands that try to sound just like Morbid Angel.
It's like what we talked about with movies, you know what I mean? You get like to the old 70s and 80s movies that might have a concept that we feel like is a bit drawn out now. But back in the day when people first saw these certain films, they were like, wow, I've never seen anything like that. So it's like what you said when you got to get in the mindset of someone that's just listening to that album for the first time. I'll just watch that movie for the first time. Like, it's mind blowing.
Yeah, it is. You kind of sit there and go, oh, fucking, that's where this sort of got. This is where that got that from. This is where that got that from.
Yeah.
It's weird, like I was listening to him, like, oh, yeah, it's getting a bit repetitive, like midway through.
Yeah.
But then I was like, kind of snapped out of it. I was like, wait, no, it's not fucking repetitive. There's just been a bunch of copycats.
Yeah. Absolutely. But anyway, so let's compare. So let's skip ahead a few more years and get to Gatecreeper, who are a modern death metal band who are still repping it and still making amazing music. So what are the differences and what are the similarities, do you think?
I would definitely say the differences, especially in this album, is that it takes a slower approach.
Yeah.
And it also, I feel like because we're making a series out of this, that we're gonna keep seeing this constant theme run up where they didn't just pull from one thing, they
Yeah.
pulled from other things to then make a better thing.
Absolutely.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like this. I fucking love this album. For one, I own it on
It's
vinyl.
amazing.
You know what I mean? So that's how much I like it. That the fact that I was, well, it was an anniversary gift. So big shout out to my missus for getting that.
Big shout out to Mrs. Sorry.
But yeah, I fucking love this album. I feel like what's same is that you still got, the standard of, how low the vocals are, the tuning of it, and that it is, and it has to be heavy as fuck.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, it has to be. Like, that's all you got to say. Like, it has to be heavy as fuck.
Yeah. But they take all the best elements of how was happening in the 90s and they make it their own. Like, they're not really bringing anything new to the table, but there's nothing wrong with that, because sometimes you've got to roll with something that you know is good and stick with it, because sometimes you get bands, they try something new, it doesn't work. But Gatecreeper, an example of like just using the best elements and doing it well.
Yeah, as well, I feel like the fact that they're on Relapse as well, and they're a newer band, that I think it speaks volume, because obviously Relapse is fucking one of the biggest record labels, especially for like death metal bands. They're like
a bit sure on that.
Yeah, like Earache as well. That's another fucking big record label that's big for death metal. Like,
absolutely,
the fact that these guys are on Relapse really speaks volume on how good they actually are as a band.
Yeah, absolutely.
It when you read the actual synopsis of the album, they did say that they pulled from obviously the 90s Floridian death metal, but they also pulled from Swedish death metal as well. And kind of
see that in the melody,
the two together, yeah. And I feel like that really enhanced the music for me, because Swedish death metal for me was much more melodic over just being relentlessly heavy. You got to listen to like At the Gate, Slaughter of the Soul. It's a perfect example of that. It didn't choose to be ridiculously heavy. It chose to be, like melodic and catchy. Yeah. And I feel like this album has a perfect combination of both.
Well, that's one of my points as well. Yeah, like the melody and structure of it does set it apart, and I think it's important sometimes, and it's nice to see a bit more melodic, a bit more melody in death metal, because you've got At the Gates, you've got Amon Amarth, you've got Dark Tranquility, and they show that if you put a bit of melody in it, we can still be brutal, but in a different way, like in a dark way. And I like that about Gatecreeper. I think it's because if you can hear even like I said about the bloodbath in them, like in the distorted guitars, but yet the riffs are also melodic, so it's like a different thing altogether, which is nice.
As well, did you pick up on they were kind of like they had doomy-esque and sludge metal related sort of like themes in there as well? Like, I want to kind of bring up Deserted as one of those ones that kind of prove my point. Like, the song is what kicks off the album, and it starts off very slow, chuggy, and with very, very doomy vibes. But it's also got a very catchy, punchy riff to go along with it. And then as the song goes on, it gets much faster, and it's like it starts to kick in more. But I feel like this was a really good way of kind of showing what elements is going to be in the album as the first song, which I feel like was intended. Like, you've got a death metal band, but you haven't just got a death metal band. You've got a death metal band that's pulling from this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
And it was interesting to listen to, and I think it's one of the best modern death metal albums I've listened to recently.
Fantastic, but I can also see. I saw a bit of hardcore influence in the vocals sometimes, because he's got this sort of shouting guttural, and I don't know. It's like when he said like it reminded you of a death metal power trip.
No, I said it was like if Entombed and Power Trip had a baby.
That's what I mean. But then you
Like
got Power Trip who are kind of a bit hardcore. I don't know. I got like vibes from it when he's doing his vocals. Like it didn't seem like just death metal to me.
Yeah, no, I got the feeling that it was going for other stuff as well. Like, but can we also just take a moment to like recognize that his vocals are really, really fucking good.
Oh yeah.
Like, have you ever listened? Have you ever seen them live? Have you ever seen like clips of them live?
I don't think so. No, I know that they were meant to do Damnation this year,
I know that they still are meant to be doing Damnation next year,
and we will be going.
and we will definitely be going
We will be going.
if you know
The
current
old
situations change.
Yeah.
But you know who else is playing Damnation next year? Blood Incarnation. No, Blood
Oh,
Incantation.
I love Blood Incantation.
Yeah,
Another great death metal band.
They're playing soon as well. In Damnation. It's fucking I can't wait for that, man. Can't wait for that. But yeah, as well, Puncture Wounds, very fast, very flashy. And I gotta say, the guitar tone that they use all the way through this album, as well as some in the previous albums, spot on. Like that
Absolutely.
guitar tone, I think is perfect for death metal because it's punchy, but it's not. I feel like there's a good even medium. Like it doesn't have to be too aggressive, but
No, it
it could be
doesn't.
just enough to sound dirty. If you get me.
That's what I like. It's like dark, dirty, visceral. Like from the beginning of the album, it's like a storm of just fucking brutality. But like you said, stripped down, a bit more melodic, and everything just works well in the places that they put them in. And that's what I like
Yeah.
about the album.
Yeah, it's very, very, very fucking. It's such an amazing album. From the Ashes, it's got a very, very good melodic opener that hooks you pretty much as soon as the track starts, and then just over halfway, it's got. I describe them as fucking face cruncher.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, one of those breakdowns that just make you go
Mm.
sort of thing.
So it's a good one.
Yeah, it's got it's got that breakdown towards just a little bit after halfway. And then also the backing guitars, they're just playing subtle little notes behind this breakdown, and then that carries on from the breakdown once it's ended. And I felt like that was a really nice touch. I felt like they didn't have to do that, but they did, and it added to the song.
Yeah,
100% added to the
gives it
song.
like gives it a bit of depth, doesn't it? I
It
think
does
they
it.
have different stuff in that they don't have to, but they do.
It creates more of an atmosphere. I mean, it creates like a very, very good atmospheric sort of like experience for listening when bands do stuff like that. Like, so yeah, that was definitely a standout song for me.
Yeah.
Another standout song is Everlasting.
Everlasting's my favourite one as well.
Well, that's what I put
Yeah.
on my notes. This is my favorite song
Yeah.
from the album. The vocals are very fucking spooky, and they're very, very doomy.
Yeah.
And the riffs are just tight and catchy. And yeah, I feel that song's my favorite from the album.
I think it's got like a good balance of tempo change as well, as opposed to the other ones. Not that
Mm.
the others don't, but I think in this one, there's just that perfect balance.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. There's just a right mix of everything that they previously expanded on anyway. I really that's honestly my favorite song from the album.
Yeah.
Is there any songs that you kind of felt stood out?
Literally the ones that we mentioned, so Deserted and Everlasting.
Yeah.
Probably two of my favourites.
Yeah. So
The exact reasons that we've discussed, yeah.
So overall, this album's amazing. I think it's definitely in the future, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years down the line, it has that feeling of that this is going to be classed as a classic.
Yeah.
I mean, someone's going to have this, in the collection, but this is the same way we look at Morbid Angel now.
Yeah.
as this is, you know, an amazing album. This is a classic album, you know, like, and you know, I love it that much that I've got the vinyl and I play it almost every fucking day. Like, so I fucking love it. I'd rate it 10 out of 10 as well, to be honest, for me, because it's up there for me. What would you rate it, Brad?
I'd rate it an 8.5 out of 10. It's an amazing album. I can't fault it, but I think it's just for the reason that I feel like it doesn't bring anything new, and that's the only reason why I won't give it the 1.5. But nevertheless, you know, musicianship is on point. Like, they've got all the elements together and work it really well.
Yeah.
So what about comparing that to Altars and Madness then? Like, what do you think of the similarities between the two?
Well, you can definitely hear in that album the sort of inspirations from Florida death metal.
Yeah.
I would compare it to. It's hard to compare it to a classic album, but I'm gonna do it. I feel like the Altars and Madness is obviously higher than it in terms of like my chart and musicianship.
Yeah.
But I feel like Gatecreeper has expanded on what is death metal in a way.
Yeah.
Like, you know, people just assume that it's constantly hitting, you know, like constantly blast beats, constantly relentless heaviness. But I feel that they've also went, yeah, but what if we took elements from Swedish death metal?
Yeah.
And I feel like, obviously, you know, given the times, you know, they've been able to pull from other places.
Yeah.
But I also think it's definitely an advantage that newer bands have that they don't use.
No, I completely agree. And I think for that fact alone, it does make Gatecreeper's album, you know, a lot more three-dimensional than Morbid Angels, because Morbid Angel were playing with less stuff at the time. But Gatecreeper have allowed to sort of perfect what a lot of these bands have done and make it their own.
Yeah.
So in that way, it is hard to compare because, you know, they've both got different elements that they can pick out of different genres that are now available to them. But I think they're both amazing albums, and like you said, I think they'll both be remembered 10 years down the line of being fantastic albums and timeless.
Yeah, as well, like, I feel when we talk about classic death metal, like, it's hard to pinpoint the changing point because it's inspired so much stuff off of that.
Yeah.
Like, you know, we wouldn't have black metal if we didn't have death metal in the 90s, because obviously black metal was started as a complete fuck you to death metal.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it was started for that because, you know, a lot of people were like, I'm sick of listening to death metal now. They all sound the same, and they started black metal as like kind of like a fuck you to them all.
Well, it's quite interesting you say that, and obviously we can touch upon it more when we get to our black metal episode. However, a lot of bands made, like you said, made black metal because they were sick of what death metal had become as the years went on. So they wanted to change it back to the raw style that it used to be.
Yeah. And I feel like the rawness hasn't left death metal.
No, it's just evolved into something else that's not your traditional rawness.
Well, I think the rawness from early death metal comes from still trying to find its footing as a genre.
Yeah.
I feel like that's where it comes from. It's trying to find its footing as a genre, because, and I feel like and once it captured it, I feel like that's where a bit of the magic got left in the 90s.
Yeah.
But you had bands that just kept grinding and kept grinding and kept grinding, but then kept it alive. And then if it weren't for bands like Gatecreeper now, like, kind of coming out and being like, right, this is us waving the flag again, here's our version of death metal, then it wouldn't be, I don't think it would be nearly as big as a thing as it was. I think it would just literally be like the new band, the old bands going, and that'll be it.
But you want new bands like Gatecreeper to keep waving the flag and, like, you know, showing the way for other bands to come after them to say, look, we can still do it. Because once those older bands are gone, that's it. You want to make sure people are still keeping the genre alive, and that's what Gatecreeper do.
Yeah, that's exactly what they do. That's exactly what they do. it's so interesting, like this process that we went through, because I got to listen to, a classic album which I love, but I also got to listen to a new album which I love, in my eyes equally. And for me, the biggest thing of how death metal has changed is that it lost its original rawness by trying to found its sound and being as aggressive as possible.
Yeah.
It found a new rawness by being able to pull from other genres.
Yeah.
As well as, like, still trying to push the envelope of what's heavy. Do you know what I mean? Like, oh, let's try to push as far as we can go with this stuff. And that's where it found its new rawness.
Exactly. No, I completely agree. This has been our death metal episode. Morbid Angel, Gatecreeper, amazing bands. Thank you very much for tuning in and join us for the black metal episode.
Let us know in the comments.
Yeah.
What album you think's better.
Yeah.
Yeah, what album? Or if you've got other suggestions of who we should actually review for death metal, if we do a death metal part 2, give us a new band, give us an old band.
And we'll do it.
And we'll do it.
And it also makes it easier because me and Nathan don't have to decide which one's
Yeah.
better. So you guys get the pressure.
We had a lot of fucking arguments about this.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, thank you very much.